Well, Trenton, good to have you on the show. Really wonderful. From Zurich to Italy, right? As we were just discussing, it's we're so close yet so far. But before we jump into the line of questioning that I have, I'd like to understand your background a bit. Like, could you walk our audience through how you became an everyday spy, what that is, why it matters? I think it's pretty cool. I mean, I think we're going to get into that, but I feel like just the groundwork for our audience today, that would be wonderful.
Yeah, so I enlisted in the military quite a long time ago when I was about 17. And anyone who enlists in the military really understands I have really two options. No one really enlists in the military just because they're like, that is what I want to do. Those people who do that tend to go special operations. They tend to have like 20, 30 years inside the military, right? I was not one of those people. I was one of those people who fit in the other bucket. That other bucket is I don't care where the hell I'm going as long as I'm not where I'm currently at, right? So I enlisted into the military as an intelligence analyst, basically a person who understands and is trained to think about battlefields, right?
Mhm.
Um, and through my time being an intelligence analyst, I was tapped on the shoulder and asked to become an officer. So we went through a program called Officer Candidate School, where you're enlisted, gets the opportunity to essentially go through this sort of basic boot camp or basic training, but with the dial turned all the way up to 10.
Mhm.
After you graduate from there, you get promoted as a lieutenant. And that is whenever you get to choose essentially which which field you would like to go in. And I chose the realm of intelligence. I absolutely love intelligence. I love every aspect. I can talk about it all day long. And I spent my time in there, went overseas, spent some time in the Middle East. And during my time in the Middle East, I had a few revelations in the area that I was. And one of those revelations was I don't want to just continue doing the same job inside the military, especially in the intelligence world. You tend to do the same kind of work, just at a different echelon, at a different level of looking at that same game board, right? And so I chose to get out of the military for a variety of reasons. And what I chose to do is take everything that I learned and tried to give back to the military intelligence community, specifically the US Army intelligence. And so I went back to old Fort Huachuca as a contractor and actually designed and developed the curriculums that are taught to intelligence officers and are taught to the intelligence collection managers, how we collect information with all of our different assets, and also how do we manage people inside of our community. I
Mhm.
spent some time there, but while I was overseas, in the Middle East, I had someone tap me on the shoulder who was with the agency, with CIA, and that person redirected me to this guy named Andy, right? Andrew Bustamante, founder of Everyday
Mhm.
Spy. And since then, I've been in contact with him. I participated in some of his trainings. We worked together in some ways. And it was the natural progression where, for me, when I was back in the military, I'll never forget this. I had this phenomenal infantry officer, and he used to tell me we're having this conversation when I was thinking about getting out of the military. Um, what would be that decision where you hang up that hat, where you hang up that coat, and you're willing to walk away? And for him, his response was, as long as I can add value to the organization, that is whenever I stay. When I can no longer add value to that organization, that is whenever it is time for leave. And so I really meditated on that idea for several weeks, and I didn't agree with that. What I came to my conclusion was how we think about things in the world of intelligence, where you have no permanent relationships, but you have permanent interests, right? So every nation, every country, every organization has permanent interests for their functions, for the continuity of themselves. But the relationships change if those interests align or don't align. And so I reflected that onto my own personal everyday life, where the organization no longer served my interests. While I could still add value, I could add more value that served my interest also. And the way I did that was getting out and getting as a contractor. And that same revelation happened to me when Andy asked, "Hey, I would really like for you to come on board and start this program with me, or refine this program that I built called Skunk Works." It's where I and Andy and a few other people inside the intelligence community or intelligence experience kind of take the tradecraft and the best of what we know, and we tailor it for the everyday person so they can start, you know, incorporating that aspect into their life. And we're there to break barriers in everyday life using that tradecraft. And that sort of was my evolution.
I love that. I mean, I love all sorts of these movies and everything. I'm a big, big fan. I also watched a lot of interviews well, I guess we can say your boss, kind of, or mentor, probably. I don't know what you prefer. We can also say both. And for me, it's really interesting to understand what is the gap, between fiction and reality. Because obviously, I mean, I don't know, but I guess if you look at a James Bond movie or whatever, Johnny English is actually my favorite movie. It's like a bit of a humorous version of it. It's I really like that one. But how close is that really, especially maybe tied to your work, and maybe in the same sense, and if you could explain what is the difference between doing intelligence in the army versus the agency, CIA? Like for me as an outsider, it sounds like all as one thing. I can't really say, okay, what is what? I have no clue, to be honest.
Yeah.
That would be interesting as well.
Yeah, I'll say the James Bond. A lot of people say that doesn't exist. I'll say it exists in a very, very small 1%, 2% of the
Mhm,
entirety of the intelligence community. But
mhm,
it's not where cars blow up. It's not where um, these huge explosions happens. While that does happen sometimes, depending where you're at, it's not attributed to like what you would see in a James Bond movie, right? What it is really boring. Just think about if every time you see an operation happen, for instance, with the Maduro operation in Venezuela,
mhm,
of the U.S. went in there and take Maduro. What happened was 30 minutes, max an hour of the operation. But what people don't realize is how much planning that went involved, how much reconnaissance occurred, how much analysis happened. That is where the brunt of intelligence work comes into play, where a lot of what we do in terms of intelligence is a lot of the planning stage, right? That is the biggest
mhm,
part, because if you can plan and understand the variables that are likely to occur, you can manage them and you can start controlling those outcomes, right? And
mhm,
what we end up doing is whenever the operation happens, we have it so locked tight that it is an incredibly high rate of success because we
mhm,
understand what is at play and controlling all the variables around what is occurring. That is what real
mhm.
world intelligence is like.
So can I really think of it as, I don't know, there's one James Bond out there doing the fun stuff, and then there's 99 desk office workers gathering intelligence and actually delivering it
That
to him,
that's
and then the
really
one
true
guy
to
has all
it.
the
Yeah,
fun,
yeah.
basically.
Yeah, there's one guy that's walking around that's acting all cool to actually talk with the person to get the information, to
Mhm,
write the little transcript and send it off to
mhm,
wherever it got to go. But on the
mhm.
back end, someone's still provided the logistics, someone's doing the payroll, someone's doing all of the
Yeah.
other DMV functions, right? That is what's
Mhm,
happening. To
mhm,
give like a really good, the best analogy I can come that I've came across was the 100-piece puzzle. It's an analogy that's used inside the intelligence community on describing what intelligence is really like. And you can imagine a 100-piece blank puzzle where you don't have any sort of reference of what it's supposed to look like. You're just dumped some pieces. You don't know if you have all the pieces, and you have to put together enough of a picture to then communicate what is happening and what you see to
mhm,
someone else under a really hard time constraint where you never really have the
mhm,
information. That's why we have assessments. you don't really have all the resourcing that you need. You don't have all the time that you would like to have in order to still understand what is occurring.
Mm-hmm. And when you say making it approachable or usable for the everyday person, how does it look like in practice, actually, not just in theory, but in practice? Let's say, I don't know, someone hires you, some person doesn't like me for some reason, someone hires you, find all the dirt on Enrico you can find. I hope there's nothing out there, but who knows, right? How do you actually go about this? Like, is it, I don't know, you just start to follow me? Is it more like a digital thing? Is it a combination of both? You follow the family, you follow the wife? Like, let's say very, very concretely, someone comes to you and say, hey, here's, I don't know, $100,000, do your thing. Like, what would you actually do?
Yeah. So what you're describing is the world of what we call private intelligence, right? So
Uh-huh.
you have these other businesses that are all usually former intel people, or they're trained in intelligence, whatever
Uh-huh.
that is. So we have different kinds of intelligence, right? What you're describing is a bunch of different kinds of intelligence.
Uh-huh.
And what that means is you have something called like signals intelligence, where you can capture signals and interpret that data from cell phones, from computers, from the different frequencies that are around you. You have something called human intelligence, right? Where you're interacting, you're pulling information from another person, and then you have
Uh-huh.
things like open source intelligence, or OSINT, where you can imagine someone sits behind a computer and is able to take different pieces of information around the internet and come up with something that governments would really consider to be classified information from the open world, right? It's their process in order to do that. So whenever you take all of these different aspects, that is what private intelligence is able to do for you for a price. Um,
Uh-huh.
if that company, if those people are willing to take on that intelligence contract, well, then what you see is something exactly what you're describing happening, where you can get hired to, let's say, do online reconnaissance. So let's
Uh-huh.
see, a private intelligence contract that I didn't sign an NDA for, that I can speak openly about.
Uh-huh.
Um, where we had Americans kidnapped in the Middle East. This was
Uh-huh.
around the time frame where Israel was essentially invaded and Americans were kidnapped. So I worked with a close knit team of OSINT specialists that we were able to actually, through audio recordings, video recordings, internet posts, we were able to actually locate within a half-mile radius where there was a high likelihood that those people uh, were last known to be. We were able to
Uh-huh.
package up that information, give it to some person that was essentially the courier for a government conversation, where we were actually able to put political and diplomatic pressure on certain people. I won't say the names out loud, but we were able to actually find those people and get them back home.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's really remarkable. I mean, you hear all these stories, from all around the world, how at first it sounds like a conspiracy theory. And then a few years later, it's like, oh yeah, no, we actually did that. For you, what's the craziest story that falls into that bucket? Because let's be honest, the last few years, I mean, it's all public now anyway, so it's not nothing like hidden, right? But the last few years has really been crazy in terms of, oh wow, that shit actually went down. And you're like, wait, what? And literally 5 years ago, people were saying, yeah, you're a crazy conspiracy theorist if you even took that into your mouth.
Yeah. For me, the craziest, I wouldn't say it's a conspiracy theory, but I think the craziest thing is the daily volume and pace of information that we're receiving that is just out of this world. Like you can't have a conversation with anybody about talking like just modern news, for example. Like we have in right now, like today we have a entire cabinet from the US sitting in a room in Geneva, actually.
Yes.
And we have, in the opposite room, just across the hall, we have the Iranian diplomatic cabinet sitting in separate rooms where they don't even want to have a conversation, and we have a diplomat walking between those two rooms to exchange information
Yeah,
for this deal. And then
that's
to
crazy.
amplify it, to make it even more crazy, that we have over 150 warplanes and other craft just sitting outside of that country because the president, right, said just going to give you 10 to 15 days and then there's a hard line. And so
Mhm,
you have the Iranian cabinet only wanting to talk about ballistic missile programs, while the American cabinet is looking at, hey, we want to talk about that, but not only that, we want to talk about ballistic missiles too. And the Iranian cabinet saying, no, we're not doing that. We don't want to talk about that. And they can't even agree. So they're in separate rooms. To me, crazy. We're at literally
mhm,
today, within over the
mhm,
weekend, you're going to see a flashpoint potentially happen where huge military actions create because
mhm.
two groups of people can't sit in the same room.
And you have the same with Ukraine, Russia, right?
Absolutely.
It seems whenever they talk together, there's like 17 people on each side, and the two main guys are not fucking there. It's. I mean, it would be funny if not so many people would die, but it's not funny at all
Yeah.
after all because it's pretty serious. Because I think as a leader, you have a responsibility to well talk to your enemy, no matter how much you hate them. Especially, that's what a leader should do, and that's what we don't see. I think it's another example, and it's well, at the end, it costs the life of really young man.
Yeah. I mean,
It's horrible.
to that point, I don't mean to interrupt you, but like to that point,
Yeah, but
like the Ukraine is getting a support package, right?
uh-huh,
$90 billion. That is an
uh-huh,
insane amount of money to go and fight a war where your opposition, right, Russia, their whole plan right now is to target their energy and infrastructure to make the civilians feel pain. A
uh-huh,
pressure tactic. That's
uh-huh,
like, this is better
uh-huh,
than what you're gonna find on Netflix, and this is gonna definitely be better than you can find anything on Instagram, right? Like, and I don't mean that like as raw entertainment,
yeah,
not to be morbid about it, but like,
uh,
if you're not paying attention to what is happening and like the implications
uh,
of it, is just mind-boggling to like to your point and your initial question on what is the craziest thing I've ever seen? Like today's age on what is
uh-huh,
happening in the world is absolutely
uh-huh. And how much intelligence is involved in there? When let's say Russia and Ukraine or Iran and the US, it doesn't matter. I mean, it's history repeats itself. The empires come, they go, and it's always the same story, just different names, right? But how much intelligence is actually involved in that? Like how I don't know. I mean, if I would be the US, for example, I would try to place as much really close people to the guys I'm negotiating with as possible. And I'm just wondering how far that goes. Is this like acquaintances, like, okay, I don't know, people going play tennis together, golf together in Iran, whatever, or is this like really cousin, sister, wife kind of level? Like,
yeah.
how close can you infiltrate and how realistic is that? And how is it actually being lived, in the world?
Yeah, you won't see James Bond inside of Iran, right? That guy's gonna get shot because he doesn't look like everybody else, right?
Yeah.
What the reality really makes it. I'm gonna say this. What the reality is
Uh-huh.
that I don't need to talk to you who has the information. I
Uh-huh.
can be friends with someone
Uh-huh.
who is friends with your wife,
Uh-huh.
who you talk about, who you speak openly with, who you sleep next to, who has access to your devices, who has access to your friends and your network, right?
Uh-huh.
That is what the
Uh-huh.
reality of HUMINT collection looks like, what SIGINT collection looks like, what um, different forms of intelligence gathering might look like. Now, I will say that the US intelligence is very different from Mossad, which is very different from other countries' intelligences, right?
Uh-huh. Right.
The US has so many different fronts that it has to face, right? Because it is a prime country where it has notable influence across the world, right? Israel does not have all of those threats that the US has. Israel has aligned themselves to one major threat, and that's Iran. So, where all of that intelligence goes, where does all of that intelligence collection is focused, all of their agents is Iran, is the peripherals or the apparatuses of Iran, right? So, remember how I was saying your permanent relationships aren't the same as permanent interests, right? Relationships change based upon interests. So if we're friends, you and we don't like that guy over there, our interests are aligned. We can share information between us that benefits both of us. And that is the real world of intelligence, is sharing information that benefits both of you whenever it benefits me and then whenever it benefits you.
Which basically implies if you're high up somewhere, probably not even president level, but 2 or 3 levels below that, you have to assume that everything you say is going to go through some sort of intelligence channel and the counterparty is going to know it, right? That's kind of what I'm hearing between the lines.
Yeah, and what from the lowest level, from the person who immediately gets inside of the intelligence community, even in every aspect within our military, even at the local channels, even at law enforcement level, there's something that's called operational security, where we're given training to identify the exact things that our foreign adversaries want to try and collect, and how we can reduce our vulnerabilities so that it's harder for them to try and collect it.
Mm. What's the biggest spy that got uncovered? Because I can imagine, I don't know, there's an Israeli spy in Iran and vice versa, probably
Yes,
as well.
there's a
And
lot.
probably
Oh,
at
me.
some point they found them, and what they do with them if they find them, is it just like an operation where it's a fast process, or is it they try to turn him double agent style? Like, what's the deal there?
Yeah, so it depends on the interests of that country, right? So I'm going to say the golden nugget for everyone, for what is considered the crown of intelligence in terms of human intelligence, is whenever you can get a double, right? You can turn that person against their own government because they're already trusted, they're already vetted, and they already have training. So now you're getting all of that already on a platter, plus all the information that they're going to share with you, right? So that is like the crown of human intelligence. The next best thing is not killing them, right? In some parts of the world, ending them is the optimal solution, right? Is the productive action. Whereas for broadly speaking, on most first world nations, that's not how intelligence works. It's better to follow them. It's better to understand their operation, because then if you understand their operation, then you understand what they want, what they're looking for. And then now you have a pipeline to start feeding false information, to start confusing them, to start intentionally shifting that needle 1 degree that gives you an advantage over here. Right. So you saw that in World War I with the United States. You saw that in World War II with the UK, right? MI5 or MI6, both of them, right? Like all of those operations was exactly that: collecting, turning others, and also providing false information whenever it created an advantage.
Sounds a lot like 3D chess or even 4D chess, Like you have one parameter, then you switch that one. Then you have people who follow that guy, and then probably people who follow that guy, that guy, that guy. It's like a bit of a circular thing at the end. Who's coordinating all of that? If you have such a thing, I don't know, you find a double agent or you try to get a double agent, who's coordinating it? Is there like one guy, or is it like, I don't know, department heads? Or because I mean, for example, CIA or even in the military intelligence, just so much information. Like, how is that whole operation structured, on a high level? Because with this amount of information, you need, I mean, extreme protocols to even get 1% of the information, where they have to go.
Yeah. And what you said earlier was a very good, accurate reflection, where for every person that's in the field doing the work, that's exchanging that information, that's collecting that information, there's 99 plus all working to support that operation. Planning, the logistics, the administrative functions, the security functions, threat functions, the reactionary forces to pull them out if need be, right? Like all of those functions are by teams and teams of people. That's all planned prior to that person even walking into a country.
Mm-hmm. 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 And what is the craziest double agent story that is publicly known? You know, because I guess, I don't know,
For
Soviet, Russia,
Mhm.
US kind of situation, I guess they had a lot of double agents. I can imagine, I don't know,
Yeah.
First and Second World War as well, right? Probably in this day and age as well. Maybe what is the most famous one? And what is the most recent one, you know, like
Ooh.
for a current conflict? If that's public, I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm just here asking the dumb
I'll give
questions.
you three. Okay. So I think the most widely known for the American public that kind of was a black
Mhm.
eye for CIA was Hanssen. He was actually
Mhm.
caught by FBI, and um, he was a double agent for like 20 plus years inside the CIA.
Wow.
If I'm remembering that correctly. Yeah, it's crazy. And
So he was Russian and inside the CIA basically,
no, no,
or what
no.
was
So
he?
he was an American agent that was
Yeah.
recruited by Russia,
Ah,
right?
I see.
He was a I forget exactly what he did, but he was CIA. He was actually in charge of the counterintelligence team to investigate him, right? Because they didn't know it was him. They were focusing on finding who was the mole, and he was put in charge of finding the mole. So that's how crazy it was, right? Like,
Wow.
so
Wow.
that's a really famous example that's broadly taught for operational security and talking about counterintelligence. Um,
Mhm.
I think that's the most widely known inside of the United States. As far as the most recent, oh man, there's just so many. Honestly, what I see a lot happening is in the Navy, in the Air Force, in the National Guards for the United States.
Huh?
Those people who are on the peripherals that have access to locations for ships, locations for movement of large scale troops, right?
Uh-huh.
Those people, usually on the enlisted side and usually of lower rank, like junior enlisted,
Mhm.
those people are usually targeted by the Chinese because the Chinese know about the
Mhm.
boats. And
Mhm.
that's who gets recruited for $5,000, for $15,000. Those kids locked up
Huh.
for 10, 15 years sometimes. It's pretty crazy. But
And,
yeah, go ahead.
and what happened to the Hansen guy? So
So he got arrested.
they put him
Yeah.
to prison or what?
One day they just surrounded him. They got enough information, and
Yeah.
I forget the guy's name who actually arrested him, but he wrote a book and he's willing to do podcasts. So that might be your next guy. He's pretty good. He's willing to talk about it for sure. He's pretty cool.
Okay.
I'm just the name's escaping me right now, and he's probably gonna be pissed off at me. But oh well.
We'll try to AI edit it that you remember the name. I can't do that, sorry.
Um,
Maybe in a few years, maybe in a few
one
years.
one case of a double agent that I think is absolutely profound, and it's extremely difficult to find anything on this person. Um, and it goes all the way back to the United States Civil War. Not Civil War. Excuse me. The war with the British,
Mhm,
Independence War, and
mhm,
his name is John J. Clark Jr. A fantastic
uh-huh,
case study. He ran hundreds of cells on both sides, US and British. The British
uh-huh.
thought they were his, the US thought they were his. And
Mhm,
he basically played both options for the entirety of
uh-huh.
the war and then burned all of the British whenever he decided he wanted to be on the American side. Fantastic
Wow.
case study on running entire cells the old fashioned way is really awesome.
Mhm. Is there also like a prime example between between Russia or Soviet Union and the US? Because this is the first thing that comes to my mind when I think of double agents. It's like the Russian guy, you know, with the thick Russian accent, trying to kind of be a double agent kind of situation. I don't know. Is there like an example there as well that's pretty famous or not really?
Oh man. I can't think of exact names that are really famous. The only one that's coming to my mind right now is it was I want to say a an adversary of Israel, and
Uh-huh.
that person was able to actually get excuse me, he was Israeli into a foreign adversary country. I'm not going to name, but you can look it up. Uh,
Uh-huh.
was able to actually get all the way into, I think, like number 2 or number 3 in power of that country. So they ran entire departments, ran entire organizations, ran entire security structures of that host nation, all
Uh-huh.
while being an agent for Israel, which was super awesome. They make a whole bunch of movies about it, but I think they kind of pulled the guy's name for it for security reasons.
Uh-huh.
But absolutely awesome. I think at the end there's a twist, so I won't spoil it for those who want to dive into it. But definitely worth looking into.
And if you had to rank all the intelligence agencies, the US one, the Russian one, the Chinese one, the Israeli ones, like the Swiss one, the Italian one, maybe as well. I don't know. I'm not even sure Switzerland has an intelligence agency.
Mhm.
Maybe we do. I don't know.
Oh yeah.
Maybe they're so good I don't know them. But how these actually rank and what's really the strongest one out there? I mean, I guess it must be the US, right?
Yeah. So I want you to think and change your perception on what you think is best, because best is a
Uh-huh.
subjective term. You remember
Uh-huh.
how we were talking about different countries have different interests, right? There's no permanent
Uh-huh.
relationships, but there's permanent interests. But those interests are directly relational to what is the stakes for that country? What is the threats against that country, right? So you can't really compare Israel against the United States, for example.
Uh-huh.
The United
Uh-huh.
States has a lot of threats. It has cyber threats, it has personnel threats, it has airspace threats, it has littoral, meaning water threats, right? It has a lot of different
Uh-huh.
threats from a lot of different countries who all want to and gain benefit from the US suffering, right? So
Uh-huh.
there's a broad spectrum where we have some of the highest and best trained in the world, but it's trained for our sort of structure for the government, to keep our government safe, to keep our people safe
Uh-huh.
in the ways that provide our national security interests to be beneficial, to grow and prosper, right? Now, when we
Uh-huh.
look at Israel, I would consider is the most aggressive. They're willing,
Uh-huh.
for example, they're willing to undergo an operation where they put um, C4 charges, right? Plastic
Uh-huh.
explosive in
Uh-huh.
computers and cell phones, and just hit the button one day because, well, it's time to hit the button, right? For whatever reason they chose to, whether they were going to get exposed and they can't no longer push that button, or if they were found out, or if they deemed enough threats would be eliminated, not
Uh-huh.
caring about the civilians or how they deem the risk was more
Uh-huh.
in the collateral, right?
Uh-huh.
Not attributing disaster or anything else. While once
Uh-huh.
life happened,
Uh-huh.
they're super deadly. They're willing to undergo and invade another country and blow up entire buildings. And I don't
Uh-huh.
mean buildings filled with like just straight people who are trying to oppose them. I'm talking about their target is in that 6 story of a 12-story building in one room. That whole building, that side of the building is going to be gone, right?
Uh-huh.
That's their way.
Mhm.
If they're going to perceive a threat, their sole focus is preserving the prosperity of Israel, right? So they're
Uh-huh.
willing to undergo extreme circumstances and being extremely aggressive. While what you see
Uh-huh.
in Russia, Russia kind of mirrors a lot of the US. But I would say what they
Uh-huh.
do well that's notable is a lot of propaganda, a lot of what we call fanning the flames. So in any country that they're trying to sway the political vote, what they'll do is they'll focus on anything that currently exists, any kind of embers between two different parties or multiple different parties, and they want to sway the vote because it benefits Russia. So what they'll do is
Uh-huh.
fan that flame where both those embers start just tearing each other apart, right? It starts
Uh-huh.
melting the container that it's in. It's too damn hot to be around, right? It just creates a lot of problems and chaos. That's what they're really good
Mhm.
at. Whereas what you see in China, China is phenomenal at breaking into any sort of security or infrastructure or think cyber domain. They're
Uh-huh.
phenomenal at it. But what they always do, because they're assholes, is leave a signature that they've been there and they don't care. And when you accuse them of, hey, asshole, you did this, and here's all the proof, you literally signed it. And all they do is say, oh, well, that's what happens. It's crazy.
That's funny. Because I would think that China is actually really probably investing heavily right now into this, right? I guess because they seem to want to be the new world power, or at least one of them. That's for sure, right?
Yeah.
And with this, I guess you need a big, yeah, intelligence apparatus, and there's just no way around it, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, and but you see this, right, in the intelligence community.
Yeah.
That's clearly a trend in the last, let's say, 25 years. That has happened, right?
Yeah. I'll say two things there. China is, I'm going to say, leading in competition against any other country for competition with the United States. And what you
Uh-huh.
see is they think in two domains here. Okay, the first is they're going to steal all of the information, and I mean business information, I mean education information, I mean government information. They're willing to put a person in some PhD program so they can go and get all the latest research and take all that intellectual property. They're willing
Uh-huh.
to flood the market with employees to then be recommended to the specific business to pull that
Uh-huh.
IP and steal it from a business so they can use it back in
Uh-huh.
China at a lower discount and sell it back to those same competitors that initially created it, just
Uh-huh.
rupturing the entire market. That's the first.
Uh-huh.
The second thing is every Chinese American, every Chinese Italian, every Chinese European, whatever, right? Chinese, whatever. They see themselves as Chinese first, which means their
Uh-huh.
loyalty will reside with China. So if anyone from the CCP taps them on the shoulder and says, I need you to do this thing, they don't think twice. They're like, hell yeah, let's do it,
Uh-huh.
right? Which is a
Uh-huh.
huge
Uh-huh.
problem, right? Anywhere
Uh-huh.
in the around the entirety of the world can be a potential inside threat, inside agent that's stealing your IP. Not to target Chinese here, but the evidence is there.
Uh-huh. Yeah, I have a personal example. Back then, when I was studying computer science at ETH Zurich, there were some Chinese students that they didn't let basically study with us because they were Chinese and they thought that they have some links to, I don't know, Chinese intelligence. And they were rejected from the program. And yeah, back then I thought, oh, wow, that's interesting. What is the little Chinese boy going to do, or girl? But yeah, probably I can see how they probably do this in a very orchestrated kind of way. And I definitely can see that. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's crazy.
just
It's
imagine
crazy.
whatever you were studying. Let's say you were studying something, right? And you sit next to that person and built a relationship with that person. But it's super easy to, once they understand that you are potentially a future person in a policymaking cabinet or actually building the
Uh-huh.
next thing that's going to generate the next $1 billion revenue for your country,
Uh-huh.
too easy to take that idea or introduce you to a friend who's going to build a
Uh-huh.
relationship and you're going to trust them. And now you're an inside threat in your own country because you're friends
Uh-huh.
with a trained agent.
And the scary thing is they do it so well because I think 1.5 years ago was the first time when I sat in a Chinese car. Back then it was okay. But now, half a year ago, within a year, oh wow, these guys, they really built, S classes or really, really nice Rolls Royce feeling cars at a fraction of the price. And it fits the puzzle, what you're just describing. It kind of makes sense holistically what we've been discussing now, the progress they have. So yeah, it's scary how fast and how successful they actually are able to do this. And I mean, yeah, who knows in 10 years where I'll be because they're not going to stop.
No,
They're not going to stop.
no, absolutely not. Like you can just imagine, think about where China was before World War One.
Yeah.
They literally had to move from place to place in order to have conversations and exchange information. Now they have
Uh-huh.
5G. So they didn't run telephone lines. They didn't run
Uh-huh.
electronic lines across like the US did, right?
Uh-huh.
Where the US was building that infrastructure. They skipped entire generations building their infrastructure. How they did it was through theft, through intellectual property theft,
Uh-huh.
replicating it at a cheaper rate, and then just building it into their own country.
Uh-huh. What can we do about this? Because it seems such a lucrative and successful venture that they're running, and they're not going to stop,
No.
you know? So, what is the US's answer to this, or the world's answer? I don't know.
Yeah, so I can tell you every year the United States publishes a sort of article that talks about the national security strategy. And what
Uh-huh.
that means is all of their interests for the country that's going to continue the prosperity of the nation, for example, they're
Uh-huh.
outlined. And the number one threat was China. And how they intend on addressing that is through a few different things. The first is counterintelligence, right? They want to stop the capturing of the information that is being easily exposed. So you see training
Uh-huh.
programs come from it. You see organizations starting to be built right now that trains businesses, that trains individuals publicly on how they can preserve their informational identities and informational like protection, right? How they can protect
Uh-huh.
their IP.
Uh-huh.
And then you see additional trainings. Their second sort of scope is that they're focusing on locking down cyber and infrastructure. Because what is China really good at? Cyber and infrastructure. And that is the
Uh-huh.
major vulnerability for the United States. And that is where we're heading. So much so, it was public knowledge. Um, it was through released articles I've read that one of the biggest issues right now is the US vulnerabilities infrastructure because they literally just shut it down and said, hey, if something happens within your personal business, just turn it off. Right
Uh-huh.
now, we're getting overwhelmed by the capability that is being brought towards us, right? Which just speaks to all of those people who are taking like your computer science classes or your engineering classes. Guess who's hiring? The federal government. And they're going to sell you a really nice bonus to come on board, right? Because it's needed.
Yeah.
That is where the world's going,
Yeah.
right?
Uh-huh.
So those are our two major avenues on how you can fight against what China's happening. The third really leg of this is the logistics, right? So what you saw with what originally happened it was called something called the Sea of Pearls, if you ever heard of it, right? The Sea of Pearls was essentially a string similar to oh man, now it's escaping me. Yeah, it's escaping me at the moment. Essentially, a land-based movement of logistics outside of China to Europe, to Africa, to the Middle East, to Russia, right? And
Uh-huh.
that sort of pathway was replicated by ports with China. And so what ended up
Uh-huh.
happening is that China would make a deal with these countries, right? And these countries say, I can't really pay you $500 billion for this sort of logistical support because taking everything that you're giving us, right, all of this commodity and transporting it to us, I can't afford it. But China still wants the money, still wants the business. So what they ended up doing, because everything is really dirt cheap for them, is still giving it to that country, but on the condition that they can use their port. And if they don't have a port, China will build them a port that they get to use inside their country for the next 5 or 10 years. And after 5 or 10 years, or 50 years, or 100 years for some countries, you can have it. We'll renegotiate a deal because they know
Oh.
in 5 years, in 20 years, in 50 years, that port is going to need some effort and rebuilt, right? And it's going to
Uh-huh.
cost too much. So
Uh-huh.
there's their negotiation in. So what ends up happening is you start seeing this entire train around all of Asia, all of Africa, nearly all of South America, where there's essentially this logistical supply route that China controls, that no other country really has.
Uh-huh.
And that is the super dangerous part right now. So how United States is fighting it is by occupying those countries with other what we call soft power, right? Influence, sometimes even hard power, like what you saw in the Gulf. Um, wasn't just a buildup to go and take Maduro out of Venezuela. What it was is also an interdiction of Chinese influence of ships passing through the Panama Canal, right?
Uh-huh.
Outside of the Gulf, outside of surrounding the nation, where all of those boats and planes and all these other things move to secure the waters around the United States and then pushed outward around South America.
Yeah, and it's not just third world countries. As far as Germany, in Germany, the Chinese, I don't know which port exactly, but they own a port, quite significant one as well. And yeah, same story. Like they are, it seems like they're not so stupid, after all. I'm oftentimes puzzled, because ideologically, obviously, I'm probably not kind of a Chinese person first and foremost, and I don't know. I prefer different systems as well for me, but it's crazy how well and efficient it is working. It's scary
Yeah.
as well, honestly.
If
I would have never thought if you would have told me 10 years ago, look, China's going to do this, this, and that. I would have said, ha 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 ha. But they did. They have this unique blend of capitalism when it suits them, socialism when it suits them, all in one hand, powerful, and it seems to work. It seems to work, and I'm not sure yet if that's good or bad. I guess time will tell. Probably more bad, but we'll see.
yeah,
But it's an interesting development.
you know that no one would have realized it if COVID didn't happen. COVID
Mm.
exposed, right, in 2020 to 2021,
Uh-huh.
COVID exposed that entire logistics supply. Huge
Uh-huh.
error, huge red
Uh-huh.
flag, right? Where
Uh-huh.
that exposure, the world woke up to. The world
Uh-huh.
woke up to what China was doing and how much needs to be intervened, right? And
Uh-huh.
to reflect on what you're saying, there's a term that's used in human intelligence whenever uh, you're conducting what's called a surveillance detection route. So you're
Uh-huh.
understanding whether or not if you have surveillance on you or not, so you can do your
Uh-huh.
operational act. And it's from back in the Cold War. Actually, it's called one of the Moscow rules. And the rule
Uh-huh.
is you want to lull your enemy or lull your threats into complacency that allow
Uh-huh.
you to gain advantage. And that's exactly what China did, right? So China did that by expanding slightly, right? At first,
Uh-huh.
making deals in places other countries didn't want to make deals in. So you saw that in
Uh-huh.
NAFTA, you saw that all across Southeast Asia, you saw that across
Uh-huh.
all of the islands. And then whenever COVID hit, they realized they're only 60 miles away from Australia. They're already inside of Europe. They have
Uh-huh.
half of South America ports, right? Like
Uh-huh.
that is a huge wake up call, and everyone
Uh-huh.
realizing, oh, we've been lulled into complacency.
Yeah, I think it's a good word to use here, complacency, because while Europe and the US is debating, I don't know, should we have 16 or 17 genders? They are just building stuff, and they're just making shit happen, basically. And of course, that's now a very, very silly example, but there's some truth in it as well.
Yep.
They just they don't care about all the 90% stuff that we discuss here is, I mean, in Europe and the US, it's probably not relevant, for the kind of, yeah, nourishing, flourishing of the state, of the nation.
Mhm.
And they just abstract all of that away and they just get shit done. And I think this is the biggest leverage that they have right now, honestly.
Yeah. And it's an advantage that Europe doesn't have. It's an advantage
Uh,
that the US does not have because
uh,
in democracies, we got to agree with everybody for a vote
uh,
for us to move. But if not right there, we delay it for 3 or 5 days. What happened to China? This is happening. It's happening right now. You don't like it, you're gonna move through putting someone else in charge who's gonna do it, right? So their ability to move, right? The speed of action is unmistakably like a strength. It's weakness inside of the United States and it is a weakness inside of Europe, where right now you see Europe coming alive. You see Europe coming alive to understand this is a problem. And I'm super excited on the near future. And near future, I mean like within the next 5 years for Europe, because I think it's like what almost half of European countries are all going to be getting brand new leaders, young leaders willing to entertain new ideas. So Europe is at the staging front of complete change and possibly becoming one of those pillars in a multipolar world. It's no longer might be bipolar between Russia, the United States and China, where Russia is starting to fall off. It might be Europe that stands up.
Yeah, I hope so. I hope so. Now it's really crucial for Europe to do the right decision because it's so beautiful here. Everyone who comes visit, they say, "Oh, wow, it's lovely." It would be a pity not to have this ecosystem run efficiently. It would really be a big, big pity. But yeah, I mean, for sure, the last 10, 15 years, they probably weren't on the right track. And now I hope you're right. I really, 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 really hope you're right. And I will be up for the ride, completely. So I'll be the first one on board, buckled up, ready to go.
I
But
mean,
maybe,
yeah, it'll take some work, right? Because
yeah.
what is right now a friction point for the Europeans is they have to make a decision right now is are they going to put effort and secure their culture, they're going to secure their country and they're willing to work to build a relationship with everyone else in Europe to create fast change, right? And that is because it's a democracy here and different kinds, there always has to be talks and people have to talk. There has to be some sort of mechanism that is like in a state of emergency where this person in charge about this topic, they're the person that's running this, right? If that happens and young people who are willing to take on that kind of stress, on that kind of life, they can be part of the new Europe that is changing and is in conflict right now with other cultures coming into your countries that are removing your cultures, the beautiful cultures you spoke softly of.
Mhm. Yeah, and they seem to let the wrong people in. I know so many incredibly smart guys, programmers, AI researchers, what have you, and they can't get a visa for Switzerland. They just can't. It's impossible to get a work permit here. And then, yeah, it seems like if you don't have anything on the resume, the door is wide open.
Yeah.
It's almost a bit ironic. I don't know, but the good thing is people are waking up. The good thing is people, yeah. I mean, at the end, they want the best for their kids, for their families. So they're not just going to stand there and, yeah, let idiots run them, I guess. I hope so, honestly. I think history kind of has a self-correcting mechanism usually. You have to zoom out a bit, but usually that's the case. Yeah, so
Unfortunately,
it's uh, it's
a
it's
few
kind of an interesting
flashpoints
ride.
and a few wars, right?
Yeah, exactly. No, what I always say, it has to get worse before it gets better, right? Historically speaking.
Yeah.
So that's what scares me right now, quite frankly, because it's it's not so great, but it's not so bad as well, right? And usually before you have big change, it gets really bad. What that means can mean different things, can mean, I don't know, war, sicknesses, whatever, it doesn't matter. But yeah, if history repeats itself, maybe your time scale, 5 years is optimistic. I hope it's there. Maybe 10 years, maybe 15 years at the end. Yeah, time will tell, right? I don't have a glass bowl. We don't know it. But I think in our lifetime, it's going to be a very interesting ride. That's for sure.
Yeah. And I think for the everyday person, because what the everyday person who's listening to this is probably thinking, okay, that's a lot of macro topics. That's like very strategic level understanding. What can I do? How can I think about what is going on? Right. And what I like to say is there's this thing called what we call the cone of uncertainty. Have you ever heard of it?
Mhm. Never.
No, so it's a really useful model or tool or framework that you can think of cognitively. I want you to imagine a cone where it's large on one side and small on the other, right?
Mhm.
Near the small side, it's transparent. You can see through it. Where on the
Mhm.
large side, you can't. It's very opaque. It's covered.
Mhm.
You can't see it. And on that large side, you can see hundreds of thousands of different strings or threads or cables or wires of different colors, textures, shapes, all entering that side. And on the narrow side, you can start seeing just a few, right? Just a few, two or three strings or cables, and you know what color they are, but you don't know which one is going to come out. But
Uh-huh.
what you are certain of is once it comes out, there's only that one string of that texture, of that color, what that is. So you're certain
Uh-huh.
of what comes out of that cone. And what this is reflective of is the future versus the past. You are certain of the past up until the point of today, right? You
Okay.
can have a good idea, right? Things don't change immediately. Things are built up. There's indicators, there's things that happen that's observable that you can
Mhm.
see that is likely to occur, right? We call that estimative language. What is a high likelihood? What is a low likelihood? What we are certain, what we are uncertain of, right? That's that transparent part of the cone. So you shouldn't worry about really everything because that volume of information becomes problematic in terms of almost a paralysis by analysis kind of thing. You can leave the big macro stuff to other people who are going to be willing to understand all of that and communicate it like we are right now.
Uh-huh.
But for the everyday person, you can focus on what's happening today, what's happening tomorrow, what's happening next week, what's happening this quarter, what's happening next year. And what can you do that is productive for yourself, for your family, and for your country, right?
Mhm. Yeah, and that goes a long way, honestly. That goes really a long way. Just taking every day at a time and just being good at the end of the day. If everyone really within himself or herself tries to be good and do good, that would go such a long way,
Yeah.
honestly. So I think there's no better way to end this, Trenton. Honestly, we probably could go on for another 3 hours, probably, but I think we should save that for maybe even a physical recording, since you're anyway now in Italy, right? So we might be able to do that.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's really been a pleasure.
Awesome.
Thank you so much.
Appreciate you.
Cheers.